We've started the summer, and I'm glad everybody took a few minutes to spend some time with us today. I'm going to start just like I always do with a couple of updates and a few announcements, and then I'm going to introduce Tom. First of all, I don't know, a lot of you should have been contacted by now, but if not, you will be regarding Account Central. This is something that, as we've been talking about for quite a while, we agreed internally that we would wait to get full implementation of Account Central until it was really ready to implement without a whole lot of mistakes and disruption and things like that. And we're convinced that we're there now. We had a really nice visit from Kate Shingledecker, who's actually came to Lincoln as part of the purchase of Legend. And anyway, she's fantastic and did a really nice job of training the group here and is now helping us as well with the rollout. But I would just encourage all of you now, we're going to encourage everyone to take a really hard look at Account Central and do your best to make the most of it. We think it's going to really streamline the whole account opening process, and then ultimately also, just workflow and servicing, et cetera. We think it's going to make a big difference. And so again, just I know we haven't even been lukewarm on this until recently. Now we're white hot on it. We really think this is, the future of how we want to operate and do business, and that all of you will benefit from knowing more about it. So please pay attention to the communication from Angie and Shane and her staff, and we're going to try to get everybody up and running on this over time, and look for more and more ways to make the whole account opening and client service process a lot more efficient for you and your staff. Anybody on the line have any questions about that, or any comments, or anything that we could answer about Account Central while we've got you here? Great. The second thing I wanted to bring up was President's Club. So President's Club was in San Antonio. It was crazy hot. And it was kind of interesting. The first 2 days there, it was way over 100 both days. And then the weather broke a little bit. Everybody had a great time. The business meetings were really good. In fact, one of the reasons I asked Tom to speak today was because of some things that were presented there by not just him, but from also Tyler Mangum, who actually is in Mike Fisher's team. Did a really nice presentation. They've got some new systems and processes, and anyway, I thought they did a nice job of announcing that. The last but not least for me here is I have Dennis Hauser coming out here in about 3 weeks to spend a couple of days and begin the process of putting together a business plan for Wealth Management Partners. Now, as a result of that meeting, I should have some really tangible things to share in the next month or so with you guys on, the kind of projects and the kind of things we're going to work on together to really grow the firm in a profitable and effective way. But then also, the main thing I want to take into account in this business plan is what can we be doing at the WMP level that's going to really have an impact on your business. That's really the total focal point for me on building a business plan here. Because if we get that right, then we'll recruit to that. So one of the things I would ask everyone on the line here to do is just think about, what are the things that maybe you feel are would be beneficial that we could do on your behalf to help you grow your business. And I don't want to give you too much more guidance than that, because I really would like you to be kind of freewheeling in your thinking here. Not that we can accomplish everything you ask for, but I don't want to pigeonhole you into, well, you know, don't think this direction or that. I'd prefer you just to look at your business, think about what we might be able to provide for you that we don't do today, or areas where we might be able to do more or do it better, and give me your thoughts on that. I need that by the end of business next week. So a week from this Friday at the latest, because then I'm going to be out the following week for the most part, and I really want to spend that time while I'm gone to prepare for you know, the business plan meetings I have with Dennis on the 25th and 26th. So again, please, I know this, you know, it's pretty wide open what I'm asking for here, but I'm doing it that way on purpose. So any input you can give me would be greatly appreciated. So before I introduce Tom, is there anything else on anybody's mind, or any questions or issues that you'd like to bring up? All right. All right, so all of you, I think by now, know Tom Lakatos. You've been exposed to Tom in a variety of different ways. I think some of you have gone through some of the advisor training programs that he's done and continues to do for the company. He spoke at our kickoff meeting. If you've been to any of the Lincoln meetings, whether it be Wealth Forum or any of the club trips or any of that, you've seen and heard Tom. Tom is really one of the, I guess, more proficient people at Lincoln when it comes to understanding what goes on in the field, understanding what you do every day with clients. He's got a very long and successful track record of helping people develop as planners, helping them grow businesses, and it really is, I think, one of the strengths of our relationship with Lincoln. And so we had Tom speak at our kickoff meeting, and you guys all saw that, and there was a fair amount of discussion there about financial planning. He did a similar presentation at President's Club as well. And what we talked about doing, what Tom and I talked about the other day, was to have him talk today about the process, about the planning process, and give you some insights on how he coaches and develops the people that report to him now and have over the years through this planning process, so they can be both, you know, effective and efficient in that process. There are also some tools and some things that you may or may not be aware of at the Lincoln level. But also, I'd like to start this as kind of the beginning of a series of presentations and more of a workshop environment on financial planning. So one thing I would encourage you to do today is listen, but also participate. So if you've got questions, if you've got specific issues, please feel free to bring them up. We've got a fair amount of time today. I made certain that we would. But then also I'm going to be following up with you afterwards, because I would like this to be just the beginning of this discussion, because I do believe that a lot of people either are looking at financial planning as something they know they need to do more or wish they could do more. But also I think we've kind of shifted away from that over the years. We've become more of an investment planning firm than a financial planning firm. And that's not unusual. I think that's the industry. I think the investment management part of what we do just kind of took over. And while that is becoming more and more commoditized, it's really important, I think, for us to get back to process. It also fits in with kind of the theme that I brought up earlier in the year, which was, risk mitigation. So helping clients make sure that what they're doing with their investment dollars and with the rest of their planning work really fits in with, number one, their plan and their goals, but also is in line with what their true risk tolerance is and their timelines and things of that nature. Certainly financial planning probably helps in that process more than anything. So now you know why we're doing it, a little bit of what we're doing. So now I think what I'll do is go ahead and introduce Tom, and we'll let him take over from here.
Awesome, John. Thank you. I appreciate the kind introduction, and I am always grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with your group. And to everybody on the call, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the opportunity to get to spend some time with you through the summer as we put together these sessions. And I am encouraged by the opportunity to share with you some of my experience and some of what we're doing. And for those of you who may not know, let me just share with you a few things up front. One is I've never really gotten too much into my background, and I'm not one, despite what you may have heard, to toot my own horn a ton. What I will say is I spent over a decade at Ameriprise, where financial planning is at the core of the model. You charge a fee for advice. The financial plan really is a function of, it provides two things. First of all, contextually, it's never some roadmap to guaranteed financial freedom, right? At the end of the day, in my mind, I've been trained to understand that wealth and goal achievement is usually a function of great decision making. And at its core, a financial plan really is a tool to help clients make consistently great decisions that are rooted to what it is they're trying to accomplish. And the second thing that a financial plan is, and it always has been for me, is a diagnostic tool to get to know the client well enough to give educated recommendations. No different than if I were to go to my doctor and it's a new doctor that I've never really spent time with, and he doesn't know me and I don't know him, and I'd be afraid if he prescribed drugs to me without a diagnostic process. So for me, financial planning has always been a diagnostic process designed to help me understand them enough financially and in terms of their family and their goals and priorities to where I can give them educated advice that leads to consistently good decision making. And I think contextually, when you present to clients that that's part of the goal of financial planning, they have an in-depth understanding of what that means because they all have doctors. And so, a lot of clients may say, I don't feel like I need a financial plan. Well, you might not feel like you need one, but for me to give you advice, I feel like I have to know you. And this is my way of getting to know you. The other thing is, I think, and this really, I'm going to share with you something I use with clients around why I think it's important. You can see my screen, and what I'm putting on the screen right now is a website I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's MarketWatch. And you'll notice the S&P 500 at the moment is 2761. And by the way, I do this with clients because I think it's important that we root them in terms of expectation, right? So 2761, and I like this website because it's a public website that clients can access. And I think it's important over time that I teach them to not question the data that I provide. So if they can double check me, then it's even better, right? So as an example, click on historical quotes, and I can get the S&P 20 years ago to the day. So let's go back to June of 1998. And let's go back, today is June 6th, so let's see what the close was on June 5th. The answer is, it closed at 1113, right? So 2761 today minus 1113 means if you bought the S&P at 1113 20 years ago to the day and just held it till today, you've made 1,648 points. Divide that by the initial 1113 investment. You've made 148% on your money. And by the way, that includes 2001 with the tech bubble, and it includes 2008 with the real estate bubble. So what we know is, historically, most clients have no concept of that, right? In fact, if you ask them what the S&P's done over 20 years, you're going to get wildly varying answers, 20%, 30%, I lost money. Well, the fact is, if you bought the S&P 20 years ago to the day and you just left it alone, you've made 148% on your money. So here's the part that's interesting. It's not rocket science. How, in fact, could you have earned 148% in the last 20 years? And the answer is you would have had to do two things, and you would have had to do them well. You would have had to get invested, which we're awesome at, and you would have had to stay invested, which we're not awesome at. So to have stayed invested for 20 years, you would have had to have adequate cash reserve. You would have had to be able to deal with adversity and opportunities without damaging the long-term integrity of a investment strategy. You would have had to have the right insurances, because I'm not exactly positive what adversity you're going to face in your life, but I'm positive you're going to face some. And it's not a question of if or when. It's a question of how well equipped are you to handle the adversity that comes your way without damaging the long-term integrity of your investment strategy. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about financial planning. And I'm talking about how financial planning aligns with your investment strategy. And so to me, there's a natural correlation between having these sorts of conversations. And a lot of times what I find is by setting the right context at the front end of it with a client, they are more open to the conversation, because what I just said makes a lot of sense to clients. Right? You earned 148 if you bought it and left it alone. Problem is most people don't leave it alone, and they can't leave it alone because nobody wants to talk about cash reserve with them because it's boring and they don't make any money, and nobody likes to talk about insurance because they have to admit that they're not bulletproof, and they have to address things like mortality and sickness and injury and illness. And we as advisors sometimes avoid those conversations because frankly, they're painful and a lot can go wrong and the relationship can suffer, and there's a lot of reasons why we don't address them. But it fits. It's part of a larger context that positions you at the center of their life. So I just wanted to share that with you because that's a context that I use a lot when and I say to the client, I don't really want to talk about life insurance either. I don't want to talk about what happens if you die or get sicker, but I have to tell you as a financial advisor, I have to think about the things that could cause you to prematurely liquidate your portfolio. Because what I know is, despite the worst market since 1928, you made 150% on your money if you're smart enough to just leave it alone. And being smart enough to leave it alone means you have to address the things that could cause you to pull it out prematurely. So we have to talk about them. And I need a process to evaluate your risk, to John's point about risk mitigation. So I thought it might be helpful to at least start with the initial context around how to get into the conversation and how to align your desire to advantage their money with the desire to do deeper levels of planning, okay? And we'll talk a lot more about this over the next couple sessions and next workshop. And like I said, I want to keep it at a high level today and just give you an overview. But I do think context matters. And I think, as I think bigger picture about financial planning, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm not ready to say I think you should all charge fees for your advice, but I do think you should consider it at some point. Right? I've asked a lot of advisors over the course of the last couple of years, you've been at this 17 years, 14 years, 13 years. Are your fees going up or down? And most advisors, if they're honest with me, say they're going down. And then I say, right, because you bundled it in with an asset management fee that's being regulated and being driven as a commodity by the robos of the world. And let me ask you a question. Your fees are going down, but is your advice getting better or worse? Are you better than you were 15 years ago, 17 years ago, 13 years ago, 5 years ago? And the answer invariably is yes, I'm way better. I have a lot more experience. I've got education. I've got credentials. And then I always say, well, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that you're getting better at what you do and your fees are being driven down? And wouldn't it be great if people were paying you for the caliber of the advice that you're giving? Which is better, by the way, than Nicky New guys selling annuities. Right? To me, when I think about hiring a CPA, I'm willing to pay more for that than I am a bookkeeper, as an example. Why? Because the CPA's got credentials and experience that the bookkeeper doesn't have. It should cost more for a 17-year veteran than for a 4-year veteran. The problem is when you bundle it in with an asset management fee, you're being regulated by outside authorities, and you don't have as much control over your fee as you think. Right? So, I'm not, again, it's not a wholesale advocacy for everybody charging fees for advice, but I am saying over time, I think you should, as you get better at financial planning, one of the things you can consider is what can I charge for that? And what are clients willing to pay for the advice that I give? And I'm skilled from being at Ameriprise. I can make the arguments, right? I could go to the free gym. It's called the outdoors. I don't. I could go to the free clinic. I don't, right? Sometimes the perception of you get what you pay for is very real. I learned it 2 instances I'll share with you early on in my career. One is, it's a big deal when you say $1,000 fee for the first time. So at Ameriprise, your fees start at $400 on the low end and they go into the thousands on the high end. And it's a big deal when you're a new advisor in your first year to say $1,000 to somebody. There's a reason why cars are $19,999 and not $20,000, or gas is, $3 and 0.99 cents and not 3.01, right? So because there's a connotation that goes with that. So I was so proud of myself. I had this client who was pretty wealthy, and I charged him $1,000, and I was really happy. And I got over the hump, and I said it out loud. And then I went over his house, and we did a fact finder, and I find out he pays the guy to clean his fish tanks $100 a month. Think about that. $1,200 to clean fish tanks. And here I am stressing out over asking him for $1,000. And I said to him, are you kidding me, man? You paid the fish guy more than me. And he said, you quoted the fee, dude. And he was 100% correct. And I said, well, you're giving me a raise next year. And he said, well, you're going to have to earn it. I'm not just giving it to you. And he was right to say that back to me. So that's an example one. And then example two is one time I was meeting with a really wealthy guy, net worth 10 million plus. I wanted him as a client. I didn't want the fee to at all be an obstacle. I said to him, listen, I really would like you to become a client. I think I can really help you. And I don't want the fee to ever be an obstacle. I'm just going to charge you the lowest amount I can charge you. So it's not an obstacle, $400. And he looks at me and he says, son, let me tell you something. This is hopefully a good life lesson for you. You can't do anything for me for $400 that I would find valuable. No thanks. And I went, wow, this perception of my fees is in my head. Right? I've got to get over my aversion, and I've got to really stop focusing on the fee and start focusing on the value that I'm creating. That leads to our discussion today. So what I want to just go over with you today is I want to share with you a couple things. First is my process at the home office with my guys. It's a financial planning based model. You can see it on your screen. I've got 2 processes. I've got the process here on the left is what happens when you are working an existing client. So you might have you're calling an existing client, maybe you haven't talked to them in a while, or you're a younger advisor working a book for a senior advisor, or you're a senior advisor trying to reconnect with the bottom end of your book, maybe you haven't talked to them in a while. In other words, they're an existing client that you may not have a great relationship with. That's this process on the left. You'll notice this process on the right is what happens if you're a brand new prospect, so you're not an existing client. And you'll notice up to this point, they differ mildly, but after this point, they're very similar. So let me just run through what I expect from my people. So I expect eventually we're going to get into something called the consultation. I do a 3 sales call process. The first meeting is a conversation. And by the way, it aligns, I'll show you, it aligns with this. I'll share this tool with you too. I'll share all my tools with John, but I have a consultation template that we use online. This is it. It's client approved through compliance. You can use it. I think Jeremy Forbes has this. I sent it to him among others, but I'll send it to John and he can share it with all of you. This is the template for the consultation meeting that we do with clients. And I've got some scripting around this, goals for the meeting, et cetera. But what I want to show you is the financial planning process. Clarify and quantify goals and objectives is step 1. Gather information about your current situation is step 2. Step 3 is to analyze using the information about your current situation and the goals and objectives that we talk about. I'm going to conduct an analysis that takes a look at whether you're on track to get what you want. And if you're not, That's step 4. What recommendations would I make if I were you and had your money and your goals? The goal ultimately is step 5. I want you to implement the financial plan. And I'm very strong early on with clients because I believe a lot of this is expectation. And I do a lot of coaching about closing with advisors. And one of the things I find almost invariably when advisors struggle with closing business is it's almost always rooted up front in the expectation that they set. They may have a fundamental need to be liked. They may not want to be perceived as a salesperson. And so they're soft around their desired outcome, which is that the client implements the financial plan. And I'm not soft about it at all. In fact, I tie it to goal achievement, right? It's, in fact, goal achievement only happens if you take action, right? The example I always give is I say we could print a roadmap that tells me exactly how to get from Philadelphia to San Francisco. Are we any closer, in fact, to San Francisco? And the answer is no. Unless I physically start moving in the direction of San Francisco, I'm in fact no closer just for knowing it. So what I mean by that is it's critical that you take action on the financial plan and implement with an eye towards goal achievement. And then we'll set you up on a proactive service model. So this is the financial planning process. And by the way, I'm not original. This is the CFP board's financial planning process. The FPA has the same financial planning process. And what's interesting is this process aligns really well with my sales process, right? Step 1 is I want you to get into a conversation with me in a consultation. And there are 2 contexts that I would share with you. The context, if you're an existing client and I haven't talked to you in a while, is I have an obligation to review your account. But what I'd really like to do is have an understanding of how the account is working for you. It's not a question of how the account is working. It's a question of how the account is working for you, right? The example I've always give is, some of you've heard it, is I say to the client, if I could guarantee you an 8% rate of return for the next 30 years of your life, is that good? And most clients will say, yes, that's really good. And I'll say, not if you need 11. Right? I don't need to be a certified financial planner to tell you that you would be 3% short and you would in fact run out of money. And if in fact your investment strategy was aligned to 8%, you'd be investing to fail. Right? So it's not about what I can get you. And in fact, it's never been about what I can get you. It's about what you need to get what you want. And if you don't know the answers to those questions, that is the single biggest initial benefit somebody can get from financial planning, is clarity relative to the things that they need to accomplish in their life. And so the goal of that, if you're an existing client, is I want to review the account, but more importantly, I want to review how the account is doing for you. We haven't connected in a while. I'd like to schedule a meeting we call the Life Goal Priority Meeting, where I just want you to educate me about your life goals and priorities. And if I can get you into that meeting, you're either going to engage deeper with me or not. And I believe our next session, John, is going to be entirely on that initial consultation and how we drive opportunity from that. So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but you're either going to engage or you're not. The context for the new prospect, that's a little bit different. That's somebody that's not a client today, right? That's somebody who's not a client. My context for that engagement is I meet them in a networking event, or I get referred to them. And the goal for that interaction is, listen, I'm not sure if I can help you, and I'm not sure if you want my help. I'd like to meet with you for an hour so we can figure that out. Right? I'm not sure if you need my help, and I'm not sure if you want my help. In other words, should you have an advisor, and should it be me? Those are 2 different questions. And I think I mentioned that when I was out there. If you have a client when the phone rings, you cringe, you know that not everybody should have you as a financial advisor, right? That's probably a client you shouldn't have took. We all have them, by the way. So we had the moment of weakness, bad pipeline, we needed to make a sale, whatever, but we took somebody we shouldn't take. And so part of the question is, should you have an advisor, and should it be me? And I want to get you into this consultation. And again, that's either going to go really well and you're going to engage with me or not. From that point forward, though, the processes are the same. So if you don't engage with me, I set you up in my CRM as a prospect that said no, right? You are an ongoing prospect. And then depending on the interaction, I'll follow up with you from time to time, quarterly, semi-annually, annually if you don't have that much money. Depending on your goals, I may or may not put you on a drip list. I set up drip lists based on your goals. So like I have an Outlook group where if you were a small business owner, I have a small business owner Outlook group. So I can customize a mailing or a drip to you that's only small business owner content. I have, if you have children and one of your goals is education planning, I have a drip list where only the mailing comes to you is about education planning. So in other words, I get a lot of junk mail. I bet you do too. I bet the ones you open are the ones that are always relevant. At some point, if you realize that the junk mail is never relevant to you, you never open it. So I don't send stuff about children to people who are retired, as an example, unless I know they have grandkids and that's important to them. So the mailing is driven by the goal so that I can be timely and relevant in every interaction. Because one thing I know, and you know, is that this is largely behavioral. Just because somebody doesn't become a client today doesn't mean they're never going to become a client. Most advisors don't try again. They hear no today, I'm not going to engage with you. They take that as no, never. So I happen to believe a lot of life is timing. People have to be receptive to your message. And just because you're not receptive to it today doesn't necessarily mean you're not receptive to it ever. So I drip on you. And we can get into that in the sessions coming up. But if you do engage with me, then the second step in the process is a fact finder. And for those of you that have been at this a while, this is where I think the industry shifts have really helped you. It used to be, we used to spend all our time trying to get them to give us all the statements. We'd go to their house and we'd sit there for with the shoebox of receipts, and you're right, we've all done that. However, I think with the tools that you have at your disposal, and the ones we put in our tech package, Money Guide Pro and eMoney, if you've got the ability to aggregate, which if you have EMX Pro for eMoney, or you have the ability to create a client website, and if you have the eMoney portal, if you use Money Guide Pro, you have the ability to aggregate. If you don't have the eMoney portal through Money Guide Pro, you still could aggregate. It's $30 a month extra as a plugin, but you would get a link to their aggregator, which is Yodlee. And then what that would allow you to do is your strategy for a data gathering, in my mind, has shifted. My group, we spend almost zero time trying to get the client to give us statements at this point. What we try to do is we try to get the client now, and we've developed skill sets around getting the client to plug in online and upload their data into eMoney. We use eMoney on my team, and we have since I launched it. I'll just tell you, 4 years ago, the gap between eMoney and Money Guide Pro was immense. I will tell you, in the last 4 years, Money Guide Pro has significantly closed that gap. And in my mind, they are very similar tools. eMoney is a little more advanced. It's harder to learn. It takes longer to do a plan. I like Money Guide Pro a lot now. Because again, I care about one thing. I don't need the fanciest tool. I need a tool that helps the client understand their situation and make a decision. And they're not all, I saw 30 tools as part of this process. They're not all that different, right? Retirement income projection is retirement income projection. There are certainly some better than others. And I can get lost in the nuance because I can geek out with the best of them. But the reality is, I care about whether the tool leads to a decision, and that is the only litmus test I really care about. Does it lead to a decision? And both do. The trick is, if you can engage the client in their own planning, though, and get good at getting them to engage with the tool, two things happen. One, they tell you way more than you would ever get from them through asking questions. I think I mentioned this when I was out there. Money Guide Pro tells us that the average financial advisor who enters data for their client into Money Guide Pro enters 2.8 goals. When the clients do it themselves, they enter 7.8 goals. Think about that and the opportunity that comes by addressing 5 more goals for the client if you can get good at engaging them. The second thing it does is it provides them with a centralized location, and you become the center of their accounts, right? I've said this before. I personally use eMoney. I have a 401k at Newport Group. I don't go to the Newport Group. My bank is SunTrust in Atlanta. I don't go to suntrust.com. I have non-qualified accounts at E-Trade. I don't go to E-Trade to check my accounts. I have qualified money at Lincoln. I don't go to Lincoln to check my accounts. I go to eMoney, and they're all there at one spot. And if you tried to get me away from that because you don't use eMoney at your firm, you would have a hard time getting me away from it, because I have been trained to manage my finances using eMoney. It becomes a sticky tool to help with client retention. So we'll have a whole session in this workshop series around how to do that, how to bring your fact finder into the 21st century and engage clients using the tools that you have at your disposal. Then from there, we do an analysis on both sides where, again, all that really is, if you correlate it to the financial planning process, this clarify and quantify their goals and objectives, that's the consultation. Then we get into the data gathering. That's this one, where we're gathering information about your current situation. We're conducting the analysis and recommendations in this third step in the process, which is once we have the data, whoops, my apologies, let me get back to my, this one. And then I teach my advisors, we do a strategy call. So in other words, before we show you the recommendations in the third meeting, so consultation is meeting 1, fact finder's meeting 2, that fact finder happens online now. So they've entered their data, they've linked their accounts in eMoney or Money Guide Pro, or maybe they didn't, and they didn't do any of it. My advisor then will walk them through the data entry on eMoney so the client doesn't have to figure it out on their own. So it doesn't matter whether they do it or not. If they don't do it, we'll do it with them. And then step 3 is we conduct the analysis and we meet with them to present the recommendations. The only wrinkle is I teach my advisors, we do a strategy call, which is basically the day before we're going to present them with the recommendations. We call them and we tell them what's coming, because it's your financial plan, not mine. So I might say, John, we're meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I'm going to show you the results of my financial plan, and I'm going to make some recommendations to you, but I really want you comfortable with them heading into the meeting. And if you have any questions, I'd love to know what they are, because here are the things I'm going to show you, and I'm hoping that they'll make enough sense because I'm prepared to start implementing these solutions. And there are things you can do along the way. You know, for example, I'm a big believer at the end of a fact finder, if you want people to buy things from you, you have to get a dollar amount that they're willing to invest towards their goals. Because if you can figure out how to pay for the recommendations that you're providing, it becomes an investment. Otherwise, if you don't and you leave it up to them to figure it out, it's an expense. And they have to now plug into your new expense to solve their problems. And they may or may not be equipped to do that. So, you know, a good best practice is at the end of a fact finder, say, you know, John, we've had some good conversation about your goals today. How much are you willing to start investing towards these goals on a monthly basis? I don't care if it's $200 a month or $20,000 a month. It's a starting point. I'm always going to ask you to save more money every time I talk to you. But can you give me a dollar amount that you're willing to start working towards? And I'll figure out if I had $500 a month, if I were you, given your goals and your concerns and your money and $500 a month, what I would do in order of priority. And you might send $100 a month to his cash reserve and an $80 DI policy and $120 to a life policy and the rest to a Roth. I don't know. But I do know if I do it in the context of that $500, and that's not the end point, by the way. I might say, listen, if I take this $500 and I apply it to your goals, your likelihood of success goes from 40% today doing what you're doing to 65%. It would take $2,200 a month in order for you to get to 95%. Like, that's part of the decision process, is helping the clients understand the likelihood of success and the trade-offs. So that's really what that strategy call is. We make the recommendations. We're clear about wanting to implement. And then the last step in the process is once we do that, we then set them up on a proactive service model. I don't mind telling you, we'll get into this as a whole session too, but my service model really centers around quarterly meetings for the first 2 years of a relationship. A lot of advisors say that's ridiculous, but I got to tell you, if I asked you two simple questions, I think you'd fall right in line. Question one is, do you think my advice, my ability to give you advice that is quality, high-level advice and applicable to your life will hinge on the ability to which I get to know you, the degree to which I get to know you? The client always says yes. And then you say, and do you think my ability, your ability to trust the advice that I'm giving you and have confidence in me and my advice will hinge on the degree to which you get to know me? And again, they're going to say yes. And I say, right. And by the way, if you said no, you'd be the only client ever. So I knew the answers before I asked it. Here's the thing. I can't figure out how to have a quality relationship with you if I only talk to you once a year. So for the first 2 years, I'm just going to ask you to plug into my model. My models, I want to talk to you every quarter. You don't even need to come to the office. You just need once a quarter to connect on your computer with me for 20 to 30 minutes so I can review your accounts and get to know you and stay ahead of what happens in your life. And at the end of 2 years, I'm confident we'll have a handle on how each other operates, and we can determine the appropriate schedule from there. And the schedule from there is a classic. I have tiered service models for A, B, and C clients, and I'll get into that. All right, so that's a lot of information in a really short amount of time, but I'm hopeful it's helpful and it gives you sort of a big picture view. And here's the other thing I'll mention. I'm adamant with my advisors. I want this whole process from the day I meet you for a consultation to the day I implement and get you advice in your hands in 18 days or less. Because I believe the hardest thing you do is build urgency in people, especially people with money. You know, and I know they don't jump because you say jump, and you're not scaring them into anything because they're not eating ramen noodles tomorrow. So building urgency in wealthy people is a skill. What I would tell you is the client takes their urgency from you. And if it takes you 2 months to deliver advice to me, what's urgent about that? I would argue nothing. So I've seen a study conducted by InsideSales.com. They studied sales over a 3-year period. And one of the things they found was that implementation rates after 18 days drop off a cliff. So I read this study long time ago, and I said, listen, we need to deliver advice in 18 days or less, period. So my guys, this whole process that I just showed you, I gear it to 10 to 14 days. So what I tell the client is, my expectation is that in the next if we met today for the consultation, I would expect that in the next 3 to 5 days, we're online at a fact finder. And I would encourage you I would create a website for you using eMoney. I would send you the link today. And I would expect that in the next 3 to 5 days, you link as many accounts as you can. And then we're going to jump on the internet together. I'm going to see your eMoney. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to make sure I got all the right inputs, fees and asset allocation. And it just, and if you haven't uploaded all your accounts, we'll do that together online. But my target is 3 to 5 days from today. And then a week from that is when I present the advice. And I tell them that. So we walk out of the consultation. They know that I've got a process geared to 10 to 12 days from now, advice in your hand. And what I found is over time, they're less likely to cancel on me if they think, or reschedule on me if they think they're messing up my whole process. So I do that on purpose, because if I know I want 18 days or less, I can't gear my process to 18 days, because if they move anything, I'm off track. So I got to have it at 10 to 14 days, which gives me 4 to 8 days if they need to move any part of it. And it's not perfect. Some clients don't plug into the 3 to 5 days. I don't want to give you the impression that I'm some kind of crazy person about it. I'm not. But I will tell you that by having that expectation and sharing that expectation, I find most clients simply plug into my process. And the truth is, it's no different. Most of you on this call, I'm sure, have bought houses. I'm guessing you didn't tell the title company what their process should be. You plugged in because you wanted the house. They told you when you needed the inspection done. I'm betting you got it done. Right? They told you when the deadline was to counteroffer. You met the deadline or you didn't. You didn't tell them their process didn't make sense for you, and therefore they had to change their process. I've always thought about that. Like, how do I create the kind of urgency that's created when I want to buy a house where I'll move heaven and earth to get what I want? And the answer is you have to make what you're doing as important. And if it's not important to you to move it quickly, why would it be important to them? So those sorts of concepts are the kinds of things we're going to discuss over the next several weeks. Today was sort of an overview. Next, we'll get into the consultation. We'll get into the fact finder. We'll get into the process of closing and presenting advice. We'll get into the concept of service model. This is the partnership that John and I have talked about leveraging. I hope you're going to find this valuable. I hope you find today valuable. Let me stop there, John. I think that's what we wanted to accomplish today. Anything else I'm missing, John, or anything else you want me to touch on?
No, this was exactly, kind of that first step in the process. And now we did get one question. I don't know if you can help with this, but I'm not sure the answer to it. It was from Ryan Day. It says, can clients pay their planning fee by credit card? Do you know if that's possible? I can't remember.
Yeah, what I'll tell you is right now it's not. Now, Ryan, that's an awesome question. But let me explain, because I think we're going to get there. Here's what we're doing as we speak. What we're doing as we speak is we understand where it's headed in the industry, and we want advisors to have the ability to charge for advice if they want to, if it makes sense. And so one of the things we're looking at is setting some structure around that, right, based on your experience, your credentials, so we get a little consistency in the way fees are charged. We can compete with the firms that are doing it, and we give you a little more autonomy over your revenue streams. And as part of that, we are currently in the process right now. Step one is we got to create in the system the ability for a financial plan to be a product. That's already happening. And then from there, you'd be able to direct. We don't want to tell you how you should charge. We don't want to tell you how the client should pay. So we want to be flexible. If the client wants to pay with a check, great. If they want to pay with a systematic from a non-qualified account, great. If they want to use a credit card, we want them to be able to do it. We got a mobile deposit beta that we've been doing for a while now. As part of the mobile deposit beta, we have the ability for the clients to use the credit card to direct a fee to a product. We have to solve one challenge though, and that challenge is this. The challenge is I've seen it over the years where, and I love the concept, but in practice, it's very difficult. And that is this. You charge the client $2,400 a year and you let them pay $200 a month, right? And when they do that, they sign an ADV, and as part of that ADV, you're contracting for services, right? When somebody pays you a fee for advice, the deliverable is written advice. So what we're going to do is we're going to set some parameters that says if a client engages you in financial planning, you have 6 months to deliver written advice to the client to fulfill your deliverable on the advice that's being given. And if you're brand new, we're going to tell you the tools you can use to do it. If you're not brand new, you're going to have a little more flexibility. But here's the challenge that we haven't yet figured out. One is the ability for the mobile deposit project, which will allow us to use credit cards to get out of beta. That's step one. But here's the bigger issue. And I've seen this a lot. The bigger issue is you bust your butt for the client. They're paying you $200 a month. You deliver the advice in 18 days. You meet your deliverable. The client pays you $200 for the first month, gets the financial plan from you. You meet your contract. They still owe you 11 months payment. And they go behind your back to the credit card company and they shut the bank authorization off. And now you're a debt collector for $200 a month. That's the piece of it we're trying to resolve. And that's where it gets a little tricky with credit cards, because what we'd like to have happen is once you deliver the advice, if the client cancels the engagement, all the money is payable right then. We'd be able to whack your credit card for the remaining $2,200. That's trying to, and John, you know this, getting Deirdre comfortable with that is a process, right? So yeah. That's the reality-based answer. But I assure you, we are thinking about these kinds of things. We want you to be able to charge fees however you want to charge them, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually. We want you to have that decision, not us. but you should know the pitfalls of charging people monthly is sometimes they cancel and you end up chasing them for smaller amounts.
Got it. Okay. Anybody else have any questions while we've got Tom? We've got a few more minutes left. I know this is a lot to kind of digest, but
I get that a lot, John. That's okay.
yeah, I know. Yeah. So okay. So here's what we'll do. Tom's gonna share some info with us from this call. We'll get that out to everybody. Tom and I will reconvene and we'll kind of discuss, going forward how we're going to proceed here. I'm assuming that we're going to have pretty significant interest in this, but I'll be double checking that as well. But mainly what I'd like to see, I mean, this is just me talking here, is I think it's important for us to walk through this process exactly like Tom is suggesting here. One meeting, one part of the process at a time, and give everyone a chance to kind of digest that, think about your own clients, your own business plan, think about how you might implement what we're talking about here in an effective way, and also be able to bring some feedback to us, some questions, some, that didn't work, why, or this doesn't feel comfortable, why, or what tools should I be using to make the best, most effective use of this process. I think those kind of discussions are much better in a collaborative environment like this than they are one-on-one. Because while Tom has obviously got great insight and experience at this, it's nice to hear from your peers on what their questions are, their issues are, successes, failures, things of that nature. So I'm hopeful that over time we can make this a very collaborative process. I think everyone will get more out of it than that. And we'll learn from our end, as part of that, how we can support you guys in this process, because that's important to me. As I mentioned before, we're working on a business plan right now. And one of the things we're looking at is, what can we do different? What can we do in addition to what we're doing now to support your business that'll make a real impact? We don't want to run down, wild goose chases and spend time and resources on things that don't really matter to you. So your input on this is critical to us to getting that right and to make sure that we're providing the support and service that all of you expect and deserve. One thing I didn't mention at the outset, we are still aggressively looking for another employee here at Wealth Management Partners in Woodland Hills. We have what we think is a really good candidate. We're very close to making an offer. I'm hopeful that very soon I'll be able to make that announcement. But that all is coming into play where, as we get more and more efficient using things like Account Central and other systems, my hope is that that'll free us up from the back office here to be able to do some things that are more proactive, that'll help you grow your business, that are more involved in helping you grow top line revenue and for your firm. So anyway, unless anybody
John,
has any...
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So it's Ryan Day. I've got another quick question. As far as the grid, if we did charge a fee, I haven't charged a fee in a long time. Doesn't that get a higher payout rate versus our money under advisement? And maybe we could retouch on that. Is it still is it a 95% payout or 97.5%, or what is that? And does Lincoln take them?
It's 97.5%. In fact, we're just getting that hard coded, in fact, so that it's a little bit more efficient in the way we set that up at with the commission folks. So, but yes, you're correct. Yeah, as it stands right now, and I mean, I think that makes sense, because really, I mean, we have some supervisory responsibility, and so does Lincoln, over what you do there. but essentially, we're giving you the tools and the support and the oversight, but you're doing the work. And now, one of the things that I think is important is for everybody to look at, what's appropriate to charge, and then what kind of tools are you using. I've always been an advocate for charging a fee, but I think you have to go in with you have to really be clear about what your deliverable is and your process. So a lot of what we're talking about here, I think, will set you up in a more appropriate manner to charge a fee than perhaps a lot of you are today. But no, your comment is correct. It's 97.5. That's through WMP, by the way. That's again a place where I think it's a better payout relationship that you guys have with us than you would have otherwise. But that's been our policy, and we're just now hard coding it into the commission system. Okay, look, man, we did great. We're gonna finish 4 minutes early, and I think we got a lot accomplished today. Tom, thank you so much for your time and really in your enthusiasm for this. It's something we appreciate. We appreciate the support for WMP and for our advisors. I know you do a lot of this on a more kind of global basis, but it's really nice of you to spend the time specifically with us on this and the commitment that you're making to help us continue through the process that way. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And anyway, if anything comes up after the call that you guys would like to follow up with me on as we start thinking about pushing this project forward, let me know. Our next call, I believe, is the 11th of July. Let me double check real quick. And yes, there it is. So July 11th at 10 a.m. is our next WMP call. We'll be, dead into the summer by then. So hopefully some of you will be calling from the pool with your flip-flops on. And otherwise, enjoy yourselves. We're off to a great start still this year, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.
Hey, John, one more quick question, if that works.
Yeah.
Okay, for Tom, sorry. I'm thinking of these as we're talking. So, Tom, I don't know if Lincoln has tools. You talked about eMoney and MoneyGuide Pro, and I know we've got that unique pricing now with the technology platforms. Do you think Lincoln would try to create anything, per se, for a more streamlined, deliverable approach? And I know John Parsons, in his history, worked with Lincoln Financial Group. They had some tools back in the day where it was like, okay, first quarter, we're going to talk about insurance. And they had boilerplate templates. And you might use that to drive a deliverable or a discussion. And it was nothing more than a fillable PDF, but you had it recorded and you could put notes in it and you could save it. And that's even easier than, doing something with MoneyGuide Pro or eMoney. And then maybe second quarter, you talk about something else, estate planning, whatever it might be, or inheritances. I don't know if that's on Lincoln's radar, if they're supportive in it. I appreciate that, to know that they're looking at qualified plan money, credit card money, or just writing a check. But if there's something that Lincoln says, not only do we love the idea of advisors charging fees, but here's some free tools. You guys do Lions, but would there be like templates or fillable PDFs for the layman to say, this is what you do first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and at a minimum, this would cover your bases if you're not also doing eMoney or MoneyGuide Pro?
Yes,
that could be helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, and I will tell you that that's absolutely on our radar. We, the reality is, I think, is that I've seen that before too at other firms where they have sort of a calendar-driven approach to content, and how that might find its way into your service agenda. For example, you do a third quarter review with a client in September, and October, and you want to get ahead of the benefits enrollment period coming up at the end of October and early November at most firms. And that's usually a huge value add and really important. And getting ahead of raises and understanding when your client gets raises and how, if you can have the conversation before they get the raise, they tend not to spend it. But if you have it after, it's their lifestyle increases by the percentage of the raise. So I think it's a great question and certainly something that we have talked and thought about. And I'll make a note that that should be something we prioritize as we think about helping people develop these skill sets. That's great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm done with questions.
Well, I hope not, just for now. Yeah, more the merrier, folks. So after this call, please, fill up my inbox with questions or comments or suggestions, whatever it might be. And thanks so much. Please let us know. We appreciate your business, and let us know whatever we can do to help you. And have a great summer. Take care.